Hello everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning from me, Richard.
And me, Matt.
On this beautiful sunny day.
It is, with beautiful blue skies.
Looking out at the Staffordshire countryside and landscape today. It's really, really beautiful.
It's absolutely stunning.
Makes you appreciate everything, doesn't it? Even in these times of lockdowns and what's going on out there. For us personally, just sitting here in the car and just looking out on the landscape and doing this podcast is really quite a beautiful thing.
It is, and it makes you realise what's around you and what you've got all the time. When we spend so much of our time in our own head looking at what we perceive we haven't got.
Instead of looking at what we have got.
Indeed.
And what have we got?
Everything.
We've got everything that we need.
We've got each other.
Yeah, we've got each other.
We've got a roof above our head. We've got food in the cupboards. But ultimately, we've got ourselves and everything we could possibly need.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a wonderful thing. You know, when you pull back the curtain on all the doom and gloom that's going on around and actually just embrace what we've got, has much really changed? That's the thing. Has much really changed?
Well,
we're still breathing.
Exactly.
We still have our beautiful animals around us.
But it's interesting.
People we love, haven't we?
Interesting that you say change, though, isn't it? Because it's so easy to get into the we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do the other. But all that's happening is change. And change happens every single day. By 5 o'clock tonight, what we're looking at will have changed. Because it'll be dark.
It's more like it's... I don't even look at it as change. I look at it as evolving. Every day we're all out there learning something new. And whatever's presented to us, whatever hurdles, however bad we perceive it or negative that we perceive it, actually, you say it all the time, Matt, at the end of the day, everything's all right.
Yeah.
And I, from my spirituality, believe that everything's as it should be.
It is absolutely... The universe has got everything perfect. Exactly as it should be. Right now, right in this moment, everything is exactly as it should be. Simply because it is. That's how it is.
Yeah. I guess, really, summing it up, the universe has got your back.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a case of embracing it. So today's podcast is about, what, relationships. Relationships with each other. This podcast is more, we sat down and decided we were going to do a different kind of podcast, but then we thought, you know what, let's talk about relationships. Part of what we do at the Perfect Partnership Centre, part of what you do, Matt, with your life coaching, is working with people, and a lot of the time what comes up in all of that is primarily about relationships.
Yeah, very much.
Relationships with partners, loved ones, friends, or just people that you interact with on a general day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
That we end up getting into a lot of overthinking about.
And ultimately, the biggest relationship that we should be working on is the relationship with ourselves.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that's really lovely, isn't it? It's a lovely concept to look at, but isn't really a concept, is it? It's just a way of life. Looking at ourselves is about loving ourselves.
And how you feel about
how we are with other people.
Yourself.
How it expands out, yeah.
You put that out to others. So it's about, you're putting out unconditional love. So this morning, we popped out to the shop, and how we were feeling about ourselves, we put out, and look at the response it had.
We had a wonderful experience. I mean, just generally, we're parking up and smiled at somebody, and they looked and they gave a second look as if to say, oh, they're smiling. And they smiled. They smiled and it radiated. And you know what? We're not out there being do-gooders, but because it's got to come from yourself. If you genuinely feel happy in yourself, then other people will feel that.
Yeah.
And it's a kind of like a knock-on effect, like the dominoes, isn't it? You knock one, they all go.
Absolutely.
But in a positive way, because I was never really good at dominoes. I never really got the whole concept of that. But yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, it's like we were singing away because we got a tune on that we were enjoying.
Got a tune on.
Somebody else was like you two are really cheery this morning. It's like,
Yeah,
what's
she just
not
came
to be
up
cheery
to the car,
about?
didn't she? And she was like, wow, she was like, what's going on with you two? What are you doing today? It opened up a whole conversation that started from a point where we were just feeling happy in ourselves.
Yeah.
And a genuine happiness, because going around and just convincing yourself you're happy isn't what we're talking about here. We're talking about being authentic.
Yeah.
And authenticity in everything that you do, including relationships, will get the best outcome, won't it?
It certainly will, because if
The best
you're
experience.
if you're genuinely being true to yourself and not trying to make a certain outcome happen by acting in a way you think other people expect you to act or whatever, if you're genuinely just being who you are, one, you will attract to you the right people to be within your circle, as it were, but also you'll put out to everybody who you really are, and you'll share that unconditional love out,
which we'll share further.
Yeah,
It's like a chain
and then they'll
reaction.
do the same.
Yeah.
So this morning we were pulling up to a junction. It was our right of way. We stopped. You gestured to the chap to cross the road in front of us, and we smiled, and he looked back and smiled, and you could see him walk with a spring in his step. He was like, wow, they actually let me go. Now he's going to go off in his car and he'll do the same for somebody else, and then they'll feel great. So that, just by us going out and feeling positive and happy about life today, has already enriched a moment in somebody else's life.
Like I say, yeah, absolutely. It's a knock-on effect. And it's just nice. It's just nice to be nice, but coming from a genuine place of it. I mean, as we said, there's so much going on at the moment with the lockdown and a lot of negativity in the news that can really pull you down and actually start to create so much overthinking that you start to pull apart at the seams everything about your life. I mean, that's good because you can start to reevaluate in these times where you're at, what brings happiness into your life. But, genuinely when we start to do that, I find with people I work with, it's more about, it's like they're like this or they're like that and I'm not happy. But when you look at them and when we talk with people, it's because they're genuinely not happy. And what they're doing is they're pulling the seams apart on everything about them that doesn't make them happy. And they forget one main thing there, themselves. If they're genuinely happy, it will radiate out and there won't be any need to pull seams apart, and your ship will stay watertight, guys. That's what I say instead of sinking.
Absolutely.
Because we're all trying to cross an ocean on our boat. That's the boat of life. That is us, the vessel, the human being. And we want to get from one side of the island to the next. We may have turbulent water on the way. Who knows? Who can say? Hurdles are there presenting themselves at all times, good and bad. But if we truly come from a place where we're secure as a person in ourselves and in our being with our spirituality and what we put out, our boat's going to make it, Matt.
It certainly is. And you'll also find that by being really true to who you are and doing what it is you want to do in your life, instead of getting your other half, moaning about how your other half behaves or acts or whatever, take yourself out the equation and look at you and understand that it doesn't matter how somebody else is behaving down the road, or your partner, your children. That has nothing to do with your happiness. Now, you might be in a situation where you're unhappy because actually you don't really like being around the people you're around and this, that and the other. And that's something for you to really, really look at.
It's just something to understand, isn't it?
Yeah. And that doesn't mean you have to change those people. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does mean it's time for you to move on.
Well, that's change, isn't it? And I don't know, change doesn't seem or feel to me a very positive. I think we get caught up in feeling that we've got to change as people. We've got to change for other people, for our partners, our relationships, or our friends, so that ultimately we can find happiness. But that's the wrong way round. It's got to start with us. If we're happy, it doesn't matter if they're not happy. If we can do something and what we emulate out brings joy and happiness to other people with a simple smile, then that's wonderful. But ultimately, you know, just being authentic and what you put out will make a difference, but it's got to start with you. So it's really interesting, Matt. So let's look at relationships. Now, your work in life coaching must bring you to so many different kinds of people with so many different issues. But I guess ultimately, working with somebody means working with them about them and starting with them. They are the core of everything.
Very much. It always is working with that person, looking at them, who they are, what they do or don't like about themselves, and working through all of that so that person can become absolutely happy with who they are, content with who they are and what they've got. Now, when you get to that place in your life where you're genuinely happy with who you are, what you are,
it's a great place to be.
And that's when, if changes in your life need to happen, they will happen. They will automatically happen. You don't have to make something change to make you happy. The only thing you have to change is you, to look at you. And it can be a tough concept when you...
It can be.
You know, if you've got people behaving in a certain way around you and you think, well, they need to stop that because it's irritating me for this, that and the other. But that's about us to look at us. And
it's a reaction, isn't it? It's a reaction that comes from overthinking or allowing someone to affect you when actually a lot of the time you could genuinely be all right.
Yeah. And get out of somebody else's lane and get on with your life.
People can cause a lot of damage to us when we let them, you know.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of being defensive and putting up walls to everyone. It's a case of just being okay with yourself. And I know that's a big thing to take on board for a lot of people. Okay, so let's look at relationships then. So as I was saying, obviously with your life coaching, Matt, you must come up again with a lot of things coming through to you in your work. So what kind of things do you come up against with people and relationships? What sort of problems? I guess more so during lockdown and the whole tiered system. What's happened for the last year? How have you found that's been affecting people in their relationships? Let's talk about relationships as far as loved ones or husbands, wives, whatever at the moment. Romantic relationships.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge that people are facing at the moment that I've seen through the work that I do is the frustration that the people that I'm working with, the frustration they feel about their other partner because of how they're acting and coping, which is actually their other partner's frustration with the situation. And ultimately, when we work through it, it's not anything to do with anything personal. It's all external circumstances. And unfortunately, what starts to happen is the relationship starts to break apart because you start to look at each other and go, well, if you weren't doing this, I'd be okay. And if you weren't doing that, I'd be okay.
So sad, isn't it?
It is very sad.
It's so sad for the person because ultimately, if they're coming from the place where they love themselves enough, then everything's as it should be and it's an acceptance. And I always believe that we can work through any problems in relationships. I mean, my dad always said to me something that really resonated with me in my life, which was, you know, Richard, he'd say to me, you know, you don't leave any stone unturned. You work through everything. Everything can be worked through and sorted, no matter how difficult, how hard, how distressing. There is always a better outcome that can happen. But he'd always say you turn every stone, you make something work and do the best that you can. Now, that does resonate with me because in my relationships, I've always done that. I've always given it my all. I'm not someone that just goes, do you know what, I'm getting out, I'm jumping out at this point. Unless it's abusive or really destructive, I will have still turned every stone to get to that point to come to that conclusion. But I find that with my work, a lot of people, to me, I guess one of the biggest things I would say we're working with people is the word control. Okay, now we all get into control.
So what do you mean about control? What does control, from your point of view, when you're working with people and looking at it? Because control can mean so many different things, so many different people.
Absolutely.
So what does it portray? What does it mean for you,
well,
control?
Ultimately, there's two areas to control in a relationship, isn't there? There's having the control over your own life.
Yeah.
That's a positive. It's got to be a positive, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, stay in control of your own life, stay in your own lane. Do what inspires you, do what makes you happy, be with who makes you happy, genuinely. But it's, as I say, it's got to start with yourself. So there has to be some form of self-control there, but not being too hard on yourself, you know? Because people get too hard on themselves, control themselves too much, and in the end, they're not letting themselves just be free enough to experience wonderful things, okay, around them. But control also, from more of a negative way that it can impact you, is the control of other people, other partners in your relationships, and how they control you, because of course they're coming from the same place. They're not staying in their own lane, they're not staying in control of their own life. They're trying to control you, they're trying to control other people. And relationships, I find, when people come to me, genuinely, most of the time it's about the control that they're feeling from somebody else. Humans do control. Humans like to control. Humans like to get in your lane and cause you problems because they're afraid to look in the mirror at their own problems. So they project control out to other people. So I deal with people so much of the time that feel so controlled by their partners. People come on courses, the students with me, and when we start to look at ourselves and what's going on in our lives and the baggage, you know what, Matt? Like 7-8 times out of 10, what they come back to is they feel controlled by their partners, whether or not they don't feel supported to come on the courses, supported to be spiritual. Their partners seem to have a massive impact on them. To steer them away from doing something that they genuinely want to do. That, to me, is control.
That is...
Wouldn't you say?
It is control, and it's... Well, the way I look at control, it is control, but I also understand that it's that person who's trying to be controlling, even if they don't necessarily realise they're being controlling, they're actually doing that out of their own fear.
Yeah.
So
what, fear of losing the other person?
I think, well, it kind of depends on the situation, but sometimes fear of losing that person, when you get it a lot deeper, which is obviously a lot of what I do, is we really peel back and get to the core of everything. When you get it deeper, when you look at on the face value, a controller in a relationship or a controlling relationship, the person doing the controlling is so fearful of reality. So they're trying to actually keep everything contained in a box in a certain way so they can keep themselves together and organised.
Feeling secure.
Yeah, so they don't have to face the demons that they've got in their lives. So I kind of look at it a little bit differently. Every situation is different, and if you're in that sort of situation, I'm not saying you must stay there or you must get out. That's entirely up to you, because none of us have the right to tell anybody what is the right way to deal with something or what is the wrong way to deal with something. It's about having an understanding, and when you've got an understanding on many levels, it gives you the opportunity to make an educated decision about what to do next. But, like you've been saying as well, you've got to look at you first.
Oh, goodness me. I mean, it's a massive thing, looking at yourself. And for a lot of people, it's very terrifying to look at yourselves. It's one of the areas when people work with me, work with us, that they're the most worried about, you know. It's actually acknowledging what's going wrong in their life, what's going wrong in their relationship, and spending so much time consumed with the negativity of what's going wrong, they don't look at actually what's going right or what can be sorted. talking about things. How many people in relationships don't talk? When I sit with people and I say, but have you talked to your partner? Have you talked to your husband about how you're feeling? Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that.
So,
Why? Why couldn't you do that? You only have to open your mouth and express how you're feeling. And you know what? I believe fundamentally, Matt, that the majority of people that can't talk to their partners is because ultimately they've convinced themselves that they're scared of losing something.
Yeah.
So what? Live a life where you lie. Live a life where you never really tell anybody how you're really feeling because you're scared of what the outcome will be. What is the outcome? What would the outcome be by being honest with somebody? If ultimately it meant that you and your partner or your relationship, your husband, wife, you weren't going to stay together because you were absolutely honest with them about your feelings, then that's got to be a good thing. It probably won't feel it at the time. We've all been there. But ultimately, think of the release you will have by being able to be free enough to say how you're feeling. Let the other person come to their own conclusions of how they feel about it. Their feelings don't have to affect you. This is your life. It's about your feelings, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not being selfish.
Well, no, it's actually being completely the opposite. It's being unconditional love. You see, you can be completely honest with somebody about how you feel, and that might mean that the best thing to do is go separate ways. It might not. It might mean that you not keep in contact with certain friends, people that, and that actually is ultimately the best for everybody, because if you're being completely honest, then that the other people that are in your life are with you because of genuinely who you are. They're not with you for who you're appearing to be because you're trying to be accepted, or you're trying to do what makes everybody else happy, which ultimately isn't making you happy.
No, not at all. Not at all. And the outcome for all of us is just to be happy. I know it may sound easier said than done, but it's about looking at your life. What do you want in your life? How do you want your relationship to be? But it's a two-way conversation to be had. And if you're not happy in your relationship and you're not being open with your partner to talk about it, then the outcome ultimately for yourself is going to have a negative impact on you. You're going to start not feeling good about yourself. You're going to start internalizing it all. You're going to start getting into so much overthinking that you're going to come to all the wrong conclusions. It's a bit like adding 2 and 2 together and getting 12.
Yeah.
That is not the answer.
It's not.
That's not the answer.
And it's not unconditional
I guarantee you it's
love.
not the answer, because I learned to add up as a kid. So it's
good.
one thing I can do.
You're doing better than me.
Yeah.
I think
it's so interesting, isn't it, working with people and looking at where control comes from in relationships. Of course, I guess for a lot of people listening to this, it may resonate with you, this one, if you've got horses. Ask yourself, does your partner project out to you that they're really happy that you've got a horse? Or is it just a problem for them? Do they make things difficult for you? Do you feel that you have to be really quick and with your time when you're with your horses because you've got to get back, or you've got to please them? Do you genuinely enjoy your experiences down the yard with your horses, doing something that ignites you with passion as a person? Or do you change it all to fit in with your partner to keep them happy? Because ultimately, that's not the right way to be.
But ultimately as well, not ultimately, but also spinning that round to look at it a different way is plenty of people you can be down the yard rushing because I've got to get back because he wants me to cook his tea, or she's going to be cross me, or whatever. And is that actually true? Have you actually had that conversation with your partner to really know that they do feel that way?
Or have you just got into creating this pseudo existence where you believe that to be the situation when it actually isn't?
Exactly.
Okay, so that's really interesting. I mean, that we could talk forever about relationships, but I think control. I hope some of that resonates with you and listening. And I really believe it's so important to look at ourselves. You know, we're talking about our inner spirituality. We're talking about the vessel we are and being the greatest vessel we can be, which is a complete watertight vessel that's secure in who you are, secure in your relationship. Only you guys can decide whether or not your relationship's secure and what your relationship's built on.
Yeah.
So let's look at relationships, shall we, Matt? With not so much with relationships with partners romantically or however, but let's look at relationships like down the livery yards or with friends, for instance. I always like to talk about livery yard situations because so much of the time people are so unhappy where they keep their horses, for instance. It's a great example, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Where they get sucked into everybody at a livery yard and all their problems and what their opinions are on things. And that ends up creating a problem for them, doesn't it?
It does. And ultimately, that all comes down to you as an individual not being secure in who you are, secure in your beliefs, wanting to be accepted. So when we get affected by how somebody else is with their horse, I don't know, if you see someone doing great, what you perceive as great things with their horse, or they're a little bit attitudey that you're maybe not doing what they perceive as great things with their horse, and you start to change how you enjoy your time with your horse or what you're doing. It all comes down to being insecure, wanting to be accepted by others, feeling rubbish because someone else appears to be better than you. And that's all just a load of rubbish, because if you are, same as in a romantic relationship, if you are secure in yourself, you trust that you know you're doing what it is you really want to do, the way you want to do it, then we have the ability to stop ourselves feeling affected, to stop ourselves doing something different with our horse because so-and-so's doing this and so-and-so's doing that. Allow that person to be on their journey and find their own self-love, because if they're also projecting onto you that you're rubbish and they're great, they've got a lot of self-love issues themselves.
Yeah.
So it's really, the whole time
so
comes
true.
back to you having to look at you.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, I've kept horses all my life, and until I've been fortunate enough for us to have our own place, or when I met you and we got yards together, a lot of the time I was, you know, my existence was, I had my horses from a horse point of view on livery. And I found it very interesting the way that people, it's like a Big Brother experience, you know, when you move into a bubble like that. Say you're on a yard with 10 people, it's like you get the people that you perceive to be very bossy. They don't like change. They don't like new people coming into the yard. You can get into a place where you feel, you know, you're bottom of the pile. It can put a lot of pressure on you to have interaction with people, to get into a place where people like you, where you feel that you can fit in. But ultimately, you're there for your experience with your horse. You're not there for other people. And yet, generally, what happens is it all becomes about the people. I remember one yard I was on, Matt, years ago, so passionate about just getting on and doing stuff with my horse. And I was riding every day till I went to that yard. And, you know, within a few weeks, it was more about being pulled into sitting and having coffees and not actually getting much done with the horse. And ultimately to the point where we'd have coffee mornings and we'd all sit there, we'd have done our horses, and then we would have all planned that we were going to ride, and the hours would tick by with everybody's problems, everybody talking, people being bitchy, because that's human nature at the end of the day. It starts to happen. We're human beings, that's what we do. Gossip starts to crop in about other people, and before you know it, there's no time to ride. You've spent your whole day consumed with those people and those situations, and you don't always feel great. Let's face it, when you drive away from the yard, you're like, oh, I wish I'd done some more with my horse instead of sitting there and doing all of that. Or perhaps appeasing other people when you don't really want to be there doing that. You know, it's so sad when that happens, because your relationship's also with your horse.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
It is, and I think...
And that gets missed out.
I think it's really telling to be able to... If you find yourself in that situation, it's really telling to sort of look at how you are in relationships with everybody. And I mean, glancing relationships when you're just in a shop, the person serving you, and what you accept, what you don't accept. You know, when you're in a place where you will allow other situations and other people to pull you away from what it is you really want to do, then there's a big alarm bell. But that alarm bell is not to be going around making everybody else change, because it's you allowing that to happen. It's as simple as that. And that can be a harsh pill to swallow, to go, actually, the reason my horse is unfit is because I've made the decision to sit with these people all day long, because either I want to be accepted, or I don't want to be talked about. You know, they're all sat there bitching about everybody else. I don't want to be that person, so I'll join in. Well, do you know what? Be who you want
and
to be.
Step away from it.
Yeah.
You don't have to get your own place. Not everybody's fortunate enough to have that. And we are fortunate to have the centre and to be able to do what we do.
Not everybody wants their own
Not
place
everybody
either.
does. But what I was going to say there, Matt, is ultimately I would still be happy if I didn't have that.
Yeah.
I would still be happy. You know, it's boundaries as well. Let's just look at boundaries before we close on this subject, because boundaries is a massive thing that we've been learning a lot and still evolving about. Haven't we?
We have indeed.
And you know, if you've got boundaries in place, you make it clear to people, this is who I am. If it comes from being authentic, then you're emulating out, this is who I am, this is what I'm prepared to put up with in life, this is what I'm not prepared to put up with in life. And it's coming from a true, authentic you. And you won't have those problems. But you know what? Creating boundaries can be quite prickly and difficult for people, can't it? It can be really difficult to do that.
Especially if it's something new that you're putting in. Because the people that think they know you don't really know you, because suddenly you've started saying the word no, which is something that one of the big things I've worked with so many people on.
Such a difficult word for any of us to say no to someone.
Yeah.
If they're asking us, could you do this for me? Could you help me with this? No.
Or do you want to come for a coffee?
It's
no, I'm all right, thanks.
But you know what, Matt? We don't even have to give an explanation.
No, we don't.
We feel as human beings we have to give an explanation, which ultimately means we're appeasing people. And we're actually, what we're doing is a misjustice to our own inner self and our own spirituality. And that is not unconditional love either.
No.
That is putting other people before yourself. So if I didn't know you, but you were at the yard and you said, could you turn my horses out for me today? And I didn't have time to do it. My answer's simply going to be no.
Equally, it doesn't matter if you have time or not. If you don't want to do it, you say no.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a reason why you can't do it.
Makes us sound like we'd be really awful on a livery yard, doesn't it? Like we'd be just no.
But
we used to be yep.
But you see,
didn't we though?
Well, we did, and generally, I'm pretty happy to do stuff like that, and it doesn't matter to me if somebody
just an example, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but if somebody was like, I did that for somebody, I wouldn't be expecting anything back off them. So like,
yeah, but that's what happens, man.
And that's a whole other.
But it's boundaries.
A whole other podcast, isn't it?
It is, but it's boundaries, and I think we're going to touch on boundaries in more of a.
I think we should do the next podcast
of a whole podcast about boundaries, because they're so important to you staying in your lane as a person. It is a really interesting area of relationships, isn't it, Matt?
I think
we're doing all right.
Complex. Well, I think we are.
We've had our ups and downs.
We have.
We're not alien to it, you know.
Well, do you know what? Sorry, I was just thinking, I was about to say we're not perfect, but we are.
We're perfect because...
We're all perfect, exactly as we are.
But what I'm going to say is, you know, we've had our struggles.
Yeah.
We've had to get through a lot of things, haven't we?
And we've had to look at ourselves. And we always do, and we keep doing, to work stuff out. Because that's the whole nature of growing as a person, evolving as a person. And if only one of you evolves and the other one doesn't, well, you're not going to last very long anyway. And being able to see you, to be there to support your partner as they evolve and grow, but also not get involved in a way of like an interfering involved or trying to change that growth for them. That's tricky, because sometimes you end up interfering though you didn't mean to, and you realise you have interfered, or you've tried to change something you didn't really mean to. Oh, it can get right old complex. But talking...
It can be, but if you stay in your own lane and you take those rose-tinted glasses off and actually look at the reality, everything that is you confronted in life with, you can deal with whatever it is. And I love the fact in our relationship that we talk openly about things. I'm not afraid to talk about if a certain way you've been about something and I don't agree with it. I'm not going to say it, because my truth is to be honest about it. And we manage to stay generally in our own lanes and don't let that affect each other.
Yeah.
You know, because we come from a place of honesty.
Yeah.
So take the rose-tinted glasses off in your relationships. Take the rose-tinted glasses off in your situations with friendships and people at livery yards and people that you know or acquaintances. Take the rose-tinted glasses off and see exactly how it is, because only by doing that can you actually evolve and see where perhaps you could have done something differently, how you come across towards other people. You know, because it can be such a shock to people, can't it?
Yeah.
If like you take it all from someone for months and months and years, and suddenly you know, guys, this must happen to you. It's happened to me, and all of a sudden there's an outburst happens, and it's like the other person's like, "Whoa, where did this come from? You've never been like that." And then ultimately it's destructive, because you probably, that's the end of that relationship.
Yeah,
because they never knew you
exactly
as being the authentic you.
Yeah.
So be that. Be who you are. I think that's really important.
I totally
hope that's
agree.
resonated with some of you. As I say, we could talk forever, couldn't we, about...
And we often do.
Well, I do.
Well, we do.
We do. But I hope everybody has got something from that. I hope, like I say, it's resonated somewhere with you, something. Like I say, take those glasses off. Be the real you.
See the truth, be the truth.
Be the truth, live the truth, which is you. Ultimately you, and where you come from, and what you're happy to put up with, and what you're not happy to put up with. And just be true about it. Your life will be so much better, so much more enriched for coming from truth.
Certainly will.
Right, well...
On that note, I guess we better say ta-ra.
Better go and sort the Finley out, and...
We better add, yeah.
Yeah, and the dogs, take them for a walk.
All of that.
And get on and live our lives.
Get on and muck out.
Get on and muck out.
Aye.
So you take care, everybody, and we'll be back with you next week.
We will indeed. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.